Hello everyone at home, this is Adelaide Eternal, and we're not bringing you a monthly tournament this time. We normally bring you Vintage, Legacy and Highlander. This time around we're going to be doing a deck tech. So you're here in the booth with Sarven, McLinton and Beckett, Wolfe.
G'day guys.
And we're actually going to be looking at the Reanimator deck that caught our eye in round 2 of Highlander December 2016, and that deck list is created by Cameron Bird, who's with us here in the booth.
Hey everyone.
So why don't we have a look at the deck list? So some of you remember from round 2 of Highlander last time, we had a little bit of difficulty interpreting the handwriting of Cameron Bird. So we have the final 15 cards that he wrote down on the day, obviously frantically writing from card 1 to 75. In Highlander, you do need to write out all 75 cards. And by the time we got to his sideboard, it was unintelligible. However, we've done our best to try and interpret this and put it into English. So up on the screen there, we have the translations. We have Ancestral Vision, Spoglolol Gambit, and Ped Elamitrol Blosh, Mirrored Break Greg, Nullnude, and Milo Blosber. Flizzleflom is probably one of the best, probably one of the most prevalent sideboard cards you find in Legacy. Usually there's one Flizzleflom in every blue deck, but Dox is a mainstay of every deck. We have the final cards, which include some of my favourites here. We have Countless Spelt and Pyroclasm, Dispel, Spellsnack.
I like Spellsnack a lot.
Yeah, you don't want to get it confused with Spell Green Bean. So Shred Allergy. This is my favourite one. I was saying to Beckett just off camera before, do you want to go join me at a metal gig? And he was like, no, sorry, I got a shred allergy. And Beseiju who told and Freedom. So let's actually get his real deck list up on the screen now. So all jokes aside, this is a really nice 75. So could you tell us a little bit about your deck and maybe just the background principles? Then I'm going to turn it around to Beckett Wolfe for some questions, because he's got his own take on this deck too.
Yeah, no worries, Sarven. Basically, when I first got into Highlander, I was trying to find a deck that suited my style and I really enjoyed, and I found it a bit difficult at first because there's so many different types of deck that you can possibly do. But eventually I saw a Reanimator list online and I thought, I can do something with that. And originally it had things like Through the Breach and Sneak Attack in it, but I just enjoyed being able to play some really busted cards and just steal wins.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, well, Sarv and I both like that idea as well, and I was inspired by the deck to make my own list, and I put something together a little bit different, and played a few games against some of the staples in the format. So we tested my list out against Junk, and then against Blue-Red Control with the twin combo. So we're going to show you some of those games today, and we're going to just talk about the differences between Cameron's list and my list as well.
So first of all, Cameron, could you tell us about where the points are located in your list?
Yeah, definitely. The biggest one, of course, is tutoring. It's really important in a combo deck, obviously, to be able to find the cards that you want to combo with. And I've messed around with different types of tutor cards, but I found that Vampiric Tutor, simply because it costs 1 mana, you can get it on turn 1 and then go 2 and 2 off of Druids, whatever you need. It's just really efficient for the mana cost. Moving on from that, Force of Will, perfect protection in a deck like this. I don't think that needs too much explaining. You don't need to be able to pay mana to protect these guys. Dig Through Time, because we're filling our graveyard up a lot, it's fantastic to be able to do that. And then Muddle the Mixture. This is a debated one. It's actually, I've took it out of the deck now. At first I thought, oh great, I can protect my guys or I can tutor. But it's actually shown just to be way too slow, and this deck needs to be fast to get its wins. If it goes into the late game, we're probably not going to win.
So you're really lean and mean with these 1 mana searches and 1 mana filtering, and some of the filtering as well, drawing and discarding is free as well, like Frantic Search.
Yeah, Frantic Search could possibly be the best card in the deck. Just 3 mana, ditch your fat guys and play them on the same turn. It's a fantastic card.
So what would you say the MVPs are of the non-pointed cards?
Easily Collective Brutality. It's almost as if that card was printed for this deck. Honestly, like I've actually managed to 5-for-1 people with this card. When you ditch 2 fatties, you duress them to get rid of one of the cards that are hitting on you. You kill, say, the Deathray Shaman, which is a really annoying card in this matchup, and you just drain them, which is just handy.
I found it really useful in my list as well. I'd have to agree with that.
Other standout cards, basically. It's hard to say because a lot of the cards are sometimes amazing, but other cards can be quite dead in your hand. It does depend on the matchup and who you're up against. Things like Swan Song though can be great if you've managed to get out the Oath of Druids and you can give them a bird and that kind of stuff. It's got some good synergies there.
That's pretty nice. I did notice that you're running Lotus Petal and Chromox as well, just for those explosive starts.
Yeah, my new version of the deck actually has a Mox Diamond and Mox Jet in it as well. I've really tried to speed up getting those fat guys out there and being able to protect them. The hardest part was I could either get them out there or I could get them in my graveyard, but I couldn't do it all at once. So with this fast mana, sometimes now I can turn one, put a fatty on the ground, and still manage to protect it.
I was really surprised at just how different you can build this list. I mean, you can go with red, you can go with green for Oath of Druids, which you have, Cameron, and you can just go totally different archetypes, like you say, going for fast mana, which is something I did, and or you can, try to get a bit more value and have more game against the control decks, and there's just a ton of ways to play this list, which I think is why it's so fun as well. I
do find it interesting that as both of you are developing this archetype bit by bit, some of your card choices become the same. So when we do look at Beckett's list in a second, it'll be interesting to see some of those similarities and maybe where Cameron's moving as well in the future. One of the points that I wanted to make is, what's your game against Blood Moon? Because the Blood Moon effects are pretty rough.
Yeah, you might have noticed there are no basic cards in this deck. Our mana base can be wildly fluctuating, and we need access to pretty much every colour apart from white. So I threw away all the basics, and basically the idea is to just counter their Blood Moon, or to get a fatty out before it hits the table, which is similar to how Affinity just wants to win and not be hit by Stony Silence, I guess.
Yeah, and that's why your deck is so lean and mean.
Yeah, that's right. And there is some sideboard hate for it. You've got Wear and Tear and that kind of stuff.
That's good. You've also got Hydroblast, which is pretty nice, killing Blood Moons.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are definitely answers for it. It's just one of those cards. Once you see what cards they're playing, you should be aware which kind of matchup it is. Most matchups you don't have to worry about it at all, but you just play around it.
Nice. So, did you have any last questions, Beckett, for Cameron's list before we have a look at yours?
Yes, I was interested in mainly the splashing green for Oath of Druids, and also your choice of fatties. So, why put in the Oath?
Yeah, Oath of Druids is possibly my favourite card in the entire deck. It's what makes it so much fun for me. There's just something incredibly satisfying about it when you stick it on the table and they turn one to Mana Dork, and then you just get a Gristlebrand for free, and then you use the draw, you start protecting it. It's just so much fun, and there's very little an opponent can do to react to it once it's on the board. The only decks that can deal with it efficiently are some of the mid-range decks who have a Kusali Pride Mage. That's about the only card that's frustrating me at the moment, which is why I'm considering putting a Stifle in the sideboard. But the fatty choices, this was a really tough part because you've got to find the right balance with this entire deck. You've got to find the right balance because if you have too many fatties, then your hand just fills up with them, and you're never going to hardcast them, not in 7-point. So you have to find ones that are going to affect the matchup in a way that is game winning. If one lands, you need to win the game with that card. And the only exception to that is basically Platinum Angel, which is moved to my sideboard now. That's just there for something like Storm, where if you land that, they actually just can't win the game.
That's a very good point. So we've looked at the powerful cards, we've looked at the glue that holds the deck together. What about some of your individual choices? Because I know that there's often in these archetypes, there's a couple of slots here and there for interesting cards that you might want to play for personal fun. Can you tell me about some of them?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, I've been testing a lot of cards across the time, and some of them might not be correct, but I play them and see what they're like. A good example of that one is the Gyreed Sanitarium. Originally, that was Bazaar of Baghdad, which you would assume is the perfect card for this deck, but it was just too slow. You can't tap it for mana, and the card disadvantage you get from that as well, it felt bad playing against control matchups. And Gyreed Sanitarium allows you to pitch something while also filtering your hand to get the protection spells that you need, and it's won me many games.
That's very cool.
As well as that, cards like Noxious Revival. We don't really have if something goes wrong and one of our cards ends up in the graveyard, that can be quite a problem because don't have that much backup. And this is just a good way to get something back. You know, if they do manage to smash out Oath of Druids, we can just throw it back on top, try again. Or if we've already used some of our counter spells or anything like that, it's also quite a handy card in 7-point. Like, there's been matchups where I can mess with my opponent's graveyard, and that's really helped me win the game.
That's really good. And obviously, cards like Eternal Witness mainstays in the mid-range decks, but being 0 mana and instant speed is just really important.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Even Snapcaster Mage or anything along those lines, when they're trying to cheat against you like that, you can just throw it away. As well as I just want to put an honourable mention to Shred Memory as well. There are a lot of graveyard decks, such as mine, that you want to be able to prevent them from doing their thing, but it also allows you to tutor for Oath of Druids, or a Reanimate enchantment or something, so it just does what you need to do.
The Shred Memory definitely stood out to me, and I missed that. I probably would run Shred Memory because, you know, going through the mirror match hate, and it's hard to find. You know, you can't run Rest in Peace because obviously you don't want to exile your own bin, and there's a few options, but the Shred Memory is targeted, it's cheap, and obviously the Transmute means it can be a combo piece as well. So I really liked that. My normal anti-graveyard hate, I really like Fairy Macabre because it's 0 mana and it's uncounterable because it's just an ability, so you can discard the Fairy Macabre to exile 2 target cards in a graveyard, and I like that, but I think I'd probably run Shred Memory as well.
Yeah, the only reason I can't run Fairy in this deck is because of Oath of Druids.
That's right.
If I did manage to stick an Oath and I fell into that card, it would
Don't want a 2/2 flying.
No, not for that much investment.
Did you find yourself siding out Oath of Druids against combo decks or control decks that don't run too many creatures?
No, surprisingly, because of things like Forbidden Orchard and Swansong as well. It doesn't sound like much, but it's one of those cards that control decks won't have an answer for. Like, if Wolfe of Druids does stick and then you have a Forbidden Orchard or something, they generally don't have an answer for it at all, apart from maybe like a repeal. It's just not the kind of card that they have. And there are cards where, like, if you get a Jin Cataxias onto the field against control, you just win that game. I've really enjoyed playing with Wolfe. There's almost no matchups I would take that.
That's very cool. Well, let's have a look at a build that doesn't use Oath, so we can look at the differences here. So this is Beckett Wolfe's take on the Reanimator deck. Can you tell us about that, Beckett?
Yep, well, I didn't play Red, I think is one of the major things, and it was really tough. Red's got a lot of huge cards in it, like Gamble. Is It Charm is really good. It's versatile. You can discard your fatties, ping a Shaman, and obviously counter back up. Faithless Looting is just strictly better than some of the blue spells that you run to filter your hand, like Careful Study. And you're not running it, but Sneak Attack is red, and Sneak Attack is something that I really wanted to play in my list.
Yeah, I did try Sneak Attack for a while, but the problem is when you're playing Sneak Attack, you want to include cards such as Emrakul, and unfortunately Emrakul can be quite hard to reanimate when you're running enchantment cards.
Yeah, maybe we can talk about that later as well, because I was running a few cards that you can cast it, enter the battlefield, they get haste, get one swing in, and then exile. And I thought that was quite good, but I just found, unless you're hitting Grizzlebrands, one swing in is not really worth exiling a fatty and worth the spell. So I took them out and I just stuck with the classic reanimate spells that stick. But yeah, Red was very strong, and I didn't run it just because, as I was saying, there's just so much versatility in the way you can build this. There's so many ways, and I just found that I was struggling to cut cards from the list, and the
there's not much
easiest way
space.
for me to do that was just to cut a colour, and I chose red.
Definitely.
I was actually considering cutting white as well altogether. I'm just running blue-black, but it's mainly a blue-black deck, and I'm just splashing for 1 Tundra, 1 Scrubland, and then maybe getting a bit of white off my rocks. But I wanted to be able to, at some point, maybe, it could be a stretch, but to hard cast something like the Elish Norn or Sphinx, and it's a stretch, but
look, it has happened before, and there are many cards in the deck, many of the lands, such as, we've got Gemstone Mine, we've got City of Brass, we've got Mana Confluence. All these cards can give access to those colours as well. So I don't think it's as important to have dedicated cards to, that side colour when you've got working with cards like that.
And it's interesting what you said, how you're running Mox Jet. If I had it again, I'd change this current list, but I ran both Mox Jet and Mox Sapphire, so my points are Jet on 2, Mox Sapphire on 2, Force of Will, Treasure Cruise, and Dig Through Time. And I wanted some game against control, so having Cruise and Dig, obviously with the amount of discard you're doing, you actually get a lot of delve potential. So I put them in, and I've got Unburial Rights, which can get you a bit of card advantage if you're pitching it, and Squee, Goblin, Nabob, which I would have to call the MVP in my deck. A red card, Squee's a 3-mana 1/1, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if he's in your graveyard, you can put him back to hand. It doesn't sound like much, but when you're discarding as much as you are in a deck like this, just being able to pitch a fatty or something else, and also Squee, and then get him back next turn, and then next time you have to pitch, you pitch him again, and you actually don't lose card advantage against the control decks, and I felt like it gave me a lot of game against control.
Yeah, especially with Bizarre Baghdad, that would be pretty powerful.
Definitely. I mean, Bizarre Baghdad turns to Faithless Looting every turn, and in fact better than Faithless Looting because you don't doesn't cost you a card to do it. So Squee was MVP for my deck. So we've built it very different, but obviously the crux of the deck, we've got very similar fatties, and we're both running the mainstay Reanimate spells. So
yeah, definitely. There's a couple of things I've tried as well, similar to you. For example, the Treasure Cruise. At first, I thought it would be the perfect addition to the deck because we're putting so much in the graveyard, but I found that drawing free cards wasn't enough in this deck because we want specific cards. We don't just want cards. If I just take 3 off the top, it's very unlikely I'm going to get the exact piece I'm looking for. And that's why I've leaned more towards things like Vampiric Tutor, because most of the time I'm looking for a very specific card.
I guess I was just terrified of Mental Misstep. But
as you should be.
I agree. Dig Through Time was almost always better.
Yep.
Again, the Treasure Cruise, often it just eats a counterspell as well, though. It's definitely the worst point in my deck. I was playing Gifts Ungiven, but I didn't like Gifts Ungiven because...
Very slow, isn't it, the 4 mana?
Yeah, and I didn't know whether or not I wanted to do it for value and get 4 different cards, or whether I just wanted to go for the classic Fatty Unburial Rights. But then, if you're just going for the classic Fatty and Unburial Rights, it's 4 mana end of turn, and then untap, cast the Reanimate, with the Unburial Rights, and then if it gets countered, you've invested 8 mana and a whole point, and I just didn't love it.
Yeah.
In a deck that's very lean on mana sources.
Definitely. That's one thing I found is there's actually quite a large control meta in Adelaide's Eternal scene, and if you are against a full control deck, this is just a bad control deck in that matchup. What we want to be is a combo deck against a control deck. We want to go under them and get something out before they start building up those, filtering their hand, getting their 6 counter spells ready for you, because we just can't keep up with them on that pace, which is why I try to increase the speed of the deck and use counter spells which are cheap or free, misdirections now in the deck, to go along with Force of Will, and even Dispel's gone main board.
Yeah, that's another one. I had Dispel, Spell Snare, and Spell Pierce in my original list, and I just couldn't. I had to cut something, and I played around with them in my sideboard, but they weren't strong enough. And I ended up just thinking, look, Duress, Thoughtseize, Inquisition, and Brutality, I want to just hit their hand, just because I couldn't really fit the cheap counters in my deck. I'm running Daze and Force, and I'm running, as I said, Mox Diamond, Sapphire Jet, Chrome Mox, and Petal, so hopefully I do get some draws, and I think in the videos I do get some draws where you just get that turn 1 or turn 2 fatty, and it's really good. The other thing about not running the red or green for Oath is my Blood Moon matchup is a little better. I'm running 2 islands, 2 swamps. I don't really need the white too bad, really basically for Unburial Rights. And I'm running a couple more rocks than you, so hopefully my Blood Moon matchup wasn't too bad. It still hurt. I thought it would be a lot better, but I got Blood Moons and a couple times, and it still really, really hurt. So I think the logic with this deck is really you're probably going to win game 1. Game 2, 3, they're going to have sideboard, and just try to get the combo out before they draw their sideboard cards. And maybe you won't do that in the second game, but maybe you will in the third on the play. So, and I think that's a viable strategy.
That's definitely what I like about Cameron's list, in that it's lean and mean. It wants to go with lots of 1 mana, Entomb, Exhume type effects. Whereas yours, you've got a couple more miscellaneous cards like Toxic Deluge and Liliana the Veil that can play that more of a long game, and same with the Unburial Rights. So you've got a little bit more robustness in the long game, but obviously that's okay when you're fighting against mid-range decks, but once you get against the control deck, they'll just be able to set up and lock you out, which is why in your sideboard you've got things like Geist of Saint Traft, I assume.
Yeah, that's right. Geist was maybe a bit cute. I put him in there because I really thought that people would be taking out their sweepers. They'd be taking out that they might be putting in stuff like swords, plowshares, path to exile to target big fatties, but they wouldn't really have much in the way of, and especially against control decks, they wouldn't really be looking to counter it. And guys can get in for 6 a turn, 6, 12, 18. They've fetched a couple times and they're gone. So my logic there was just a totally different game plan.
Yeah, I just want to mention, going back, you talked about how it can be difficult for us to, combo off against after post sideboards, and that's why I really enjoy running Oath of Druids as well as the Reanimation and a Show and Tell, because that gives you 3 different ways you can get a fatty into play from different directions. So if they do resolve that Rest in Peace, that's fine. I'm just going to Vamp Tutor my Oath of Druid, and I'm going to go for my Show and Tell play. It just gives you those multiple outs. So they've dedicated a sideboard card to maybe getting rid of a couple of your cards, but because you're filtering a lot, if they do get a Rest in Peace, you just filter away those Reanimate spells and just go for a different strategy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Show and Tell felt pretty good to have in hand post sideboard. I'll agree. And yeah, the Oath is quite good there. Maybe I'll try this list out in red as well and try Sneak Attack for the same reason, I think.
There are many different ways to build the deck, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we've seen Cameron Bird's 2 matches during Highlander in December. So next up, we're going to go and see Beckett piloting his version of the deck. 2 matches, one against the menace of the Adelaide meta, the mid-range junk deck with Skullclamp, and then after that, we'll see him playing against the typical thing you see in Highlander, a Blood Moon shell with a Splinter Twin combo finish.
Yeah, we'll see how I go.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks for coming into the booth with us, Cameron.
No worries. Thank you very much.